Advisory Committee to consider solar energy. Mr. Skanek.
Mr. President, Governing Board, Cabinet. As the President said, this is a solar advisory committee for our district. Put together this advisory committee. And we will have written a specific statement of purpose, the dates on which they're going to be held, the date upon the event committee will be terminated, and the extent to which facility supplies and equipment and clerical support will be provided. These are the guidelines that we are to follow when forming this committee and having our meetings. It follows the open meeting laws. The purpose of this is, it's the scope of the solar committee shall determine if it is advisable for the district to invest in the installation of solar panels at the school and district offices. The district has been following this for several years, I'd say right around 5 years. We've spoken with several entities on solar. I've been to a lot of in-service on solar. I've listened to our sister districts around us on what they're doing on solar, so I figure it's about time for us to get in depth and put this advisory committee together and see what it's all about. Learn about solar and pros and cons. Meeting dates, we have a beginning date of January 30th and May 7th will be the recommending date to the governing board. The in-between dates in the yellow are tentative dates. As soon as we have our first meeting, we'll get the times and see if these dates go with all the people that are going to be on the committee, see if we need to change it or make it fit to the committee. The committee will consist of administration, teacher, CEA, electrician, principal, IT, and community member. And this, what I'm meaning is like administration, director of facilities, director of finance, manager of purchasing, assistant superintendent, IT director, people such of that nature. Select a teacher, preferably maybe a science teacher, person from the CEA, my electrician because he's done some study on it and he can help out on the pros and cons of it. Principal throughout the district. Like I said, IT means I probably use the IT director. And then a community member, we pick a community member. So we have a big soup pot of variety of all kinds of people that can look at the significance or insignificance of having solar on our district. And of course, to support the committee would have facilities, a meeting room, clerical support, internal, external input, facilitator expertise, and then if there are any other issues come up. Are there any questions?
Mr. Skanek, I just wanted to mention, like, I'm really glad to see that you have a community member on the committee. I feel like I've heard from a lot of parents that just seeing solar or like buildings looking like they are environmentally friendly is something that is appealing to them when selecting a school for their children. So I'm really glad to see that you're considering adding someone from the community.
I'm trying to get a variety. There's all kinds of opinions, and once we do a study and learn about solar and what it does and what it's about and see if it fits us, that'll be up to the committee.
And the advisory committees, they're open to the public, correct?
Yes, yes, open meeting law. There, you come, anybody from the public, it's gonna be, I'll give Hilda the agenda goes out, and that's public information.
Thank you.
Yes.
Who selects the persons on the committee?
I would be selecting the persons if there's any advisement. The board maybe wants somebody to be on this, just let me know. But basically, I've got some individuals already lined up to fit into these positions in the Creighton district.
I think it would be really fun to include, if possible, students in this process, just for the science aspect of it, since we're talking about STEM. I'm not saying it's something that should be mandated necessarily, but maybe encouraged. You know, if you do end up choosing a science teacher, I think it would be really great for our students to have some opportunity to look into it and, you know, learn along with all the rest of the adults in the process to see how it all works and that kind of stuff. Just to throw that out there.
Which perhaps could even come as attending the open meeting law.
Yeah, they would be able to join, just like we did when we built Papago. We had students in there. It's basically about the same kind of team, everybody, or anybody who wanted to be on.
I'm sorry, what did the students do in the involvement in Papago?
Well, it was an open meeting, and then we had some students, we had 4 to start with, and we ended up with 2, and they sat in on our meetings, and they gave us their opinions and what they thought about security or whatever was brought up. Their opinions were put into the meeting minutes and taken on advisement.
Okay, thank you.
They're just as important as us. They go to the school.
Absolutely.
Okay. So this is an item that is an action item. So is there further discussion or a motion?
I move the governing board approve establishing an advisory committee to consider the use of solar energy to potentially reduce electrical costs.
It has been moved. Is there a second?
I second it.
It has been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? It is approved. Congratulations.
Thank you, and this ought to be quite fun.
Good. We look forward to your report. The next item under general is discussion and possible approval of a statement on the governing board's position on the sheriff's posse in schools. And this was added by Ms. Sexton Ruiz. So I will let you start if you want to. Or I can open it up to presenters.
Well, I brought it up last week because we did talk about the fact that the sheriff had mentioned he was going to have his volunteer posse in and around schools to protect the schools. And then further found out that he was actually doing this in the town of Guadalupe, and I'm not sure if there's any other places that it already has taken place either, but it was taking place in the town of Guadalupe. Some council members from the town of Guadalupe and the school got together and made a press release about 2 weeks ago asking that he stop, that it was actually having an adverse effect on their school called Frank School in the town of Guadalupe. So I merely got together somewhat of a draft to have a discussion about it. It's, of course, things on the draft are not set in stone. And I'm not really sure exactly what we would do with it, if it would just be on the website, if it would just be amongst, the board, if we would actually send it to the sheriff. So I'm not sure about all that. I'm definitely open to discussion about it. So that's
So I think it's important to let our parents and families know where we stand on this. My concern is it's not like the sheriff really listens to us. And we've had a pretty contentious relationship in the past, not necessarily the district that I'm aware of, but just our community. And so I just would be fearful of provoking. And so that's just my concern, putting anything out there. And if we do, which I'm not opposed to necessarily, that we should be really careful with the language we choose.
Yeah, I agree about what you just said. So, but I think what you first just said is the parents knowing our position on it, and that we stand with them, is important. So.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of if we were to do something, it would be, in my opinion, something we share. I don't know that I would send a press release to Sheriff Joe's office or anything like that, or call a press conference. So I wouldn't be opposed to putting it on our website, or even just putting it in a newsletter that goes on. It's probably safer.
And I'm glad you included the part about the lack of training and qualifications of the posse, because I believe I read that one or more of the posse members was found to have been convicted of sexual crimes against children, and that is very disconcerting. And secondly, living near 32nd and Thomas and having been around when the MCSO decided to patrol the neighborhood, and talking to parents and seeing them and hearing from them about being afraid just to walk their kids to school, that's just unacceptable. I mean, our children are very safe in our schools, and to be afraid to walk to school is just...
Well, the other thing, it is a known fact that amongst the posse, not all of them, of course, but some of them amongst the posse were in a group called the Minutemen not too long ago. And the Minutemen are of a certain mindset that a certain population of people shouldn't be here. So having them be the people that are actually walking around with guns around our families and students just worries me.
And are they designated a hate group under the Southern Poverty Law Center?
I believe they are, yes.
I mean, the language that you put together for us to consider in that, I think I'm fairly comfortable with most of it. The third paragraph, though, in the use of the word terror is like really...
Yeah, that could be changed.
And so just like, so it's clear to the board, like, I don't disagree with that. And in fact, when Tiffany was talking about those raises, when I worked in a restaurant up the street, where all my employees were here legally and had permission to be working here, but they didn't want to drive. They didn't want to go home. I don't disagree with the language you've used, but I just feel very uncomfortable putting that out there as a public statement.
No, like I said, this is just a rough draft. Words can definitely be changed and sentences, etc.
I think it is important to think about what our purpose is and who our audience is in writing this. And I agree with pretty much everything that's been said here, that it is important for us to go on record. We've confronted these issues for years now with MCSO and with issues of, we know that our kids need to show up at school if they're going to do well and if they're going to succeed academically. And we've also, I think among the things that I find compelling are, rather than continuing an antagonistic relationship with the sheriff's office, which I don't think we're probably going to develop a positive relationship with the sheriff's office soon, but I agree with Mr. Zeragos' statement that I would caution against doing things that are inflammatory, but I think that a compelling reason really is that the school is already one of the safest places, if not the safest place that kids can be. And that I think from the presentation we had at the last meeting that we have, Mr. Madison talked about, you know, the specific levels of training that you would need, just someone who even has some firearms training is not necessarily someone who is going to stop something, God forbid, like Newtown was pointed out that there was an armed security person at Columbine. So I really disagree with the idea that this in any way helps public safety. I think it's more of a political motivation. I don't know how that's worded, but that's kind of where the angle from which I am coming at is we need to keep our students safe, make sure that they feel safe, and that they feel safe showing up at school every day so that they can learn. And that we want to work with whomever to make that happen, but you know, we're not.
Let me say something too. 2 weeks ago, we weren't sure on what he would be doing, the sheriff would be doing. 2 weeks have passed and nothing's happened in the Creighton School District, or I believe in you know, any other district aside from Guadalupe and maybe other county areas in Maricopa County that don't have city police. So that was really what I was talking about 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
And you know, is it necessary? I mean, is it necessary to make a statement, or if we're going to just put out notice to the parents saying that don't be worried, we oppose this. You know, it's really open to anything. I do want to. I don't know if people read about going back to the incident in Newport in Sandy Hook. I did read a very good article talking about the preparedness that they did have in the school, and that they really, that so many teachers did lockdowns, brought other kids into safe places, and that they believe had these teachers not had all this preparedness training like our teachers do, that many more would have been killed, many more. So they did have a lot of preparedness training. So going back to that a little bit, they're missing, but
I do think that anytime, you know, you want to put forth a document to represent someone's ideas or opinions, you do want to take into consideration the audience first. And so you were just kind of putting this out as a public statement, so perhaps we can try to work on rewording it so that, because I think, I don't know who made the suggestion of it going out to the communicator and the desired audience to be probably more, rather than Sheriff Joe, to have the audience be like parents and community members, you know, and so changing the wording of this so that it's geared specifically to, like Mr. Jewett said, to our #1 motive here is to keep your kids safe, and you know, and because that's our motive, and because we've heard from our families that Sheriff Joe does not make them feel safe, then this is why we're coming out with this opinion statement about his posses.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking the communicator, I was thinking those weekly or
Oh, the
bi-weekly,
bulletin.
the school newsletter
Right.
that we get in our.
well, also, I was also concerned 2 weeks ago that, you know, what would happen if all of a sudden, you know, a week from 2 weeks ago, we found out that they were there, that they were in the schools, that they were, you know, at Loma Linda or something, or just, what would we do then, you know? I wanted to know, would we call an emergency session? Would we have anything to do? Would we do nothing? You know, that's kind of what I was getting at. Is like, what do we do? You know, do we have something ready to go if that was to happen? Hey, please back down. We don't need you. Or really, what?
Are his posses like officially recognized as? I mean, my perception of them is. I don't know if they're, I don't see them as being there for public safety, and I know that's what he said, but do they have, would they have permission to patrol the streets, and would, you know, would we have the permission to say, I'm sorry, but you're on our campus, get away? I guess it wouldn't matter if they were right across the street.
I mean, they can't come into our campuses within a certain distance even, but just the fact that they would be roaming, like, that is the concern. And so no, they're not allowed on our campuses, and definitely not with weapons.
And we've seen that they, in the past, have felt comfortable being on the routes that our parents take to take their children to campus with weapons. that is a concern. But like you said, it's been really quiet the last couple of weeks, so that's interesting. Are we getting any feedback from parents about being afraid, or?
I mean, the feedback I got, I think, was, I mean, the folks who wanted to put their opinions out, to me at least, I think we addressed all those concerns 2 weeks ago. But, I mean, I didn't really talk to very many people that were south of Osborne, to be honest. I don't know. I guess back to this other point, if we were going to make a statement to Sheriff Joe, I mean, I would be comfortable advocating from a position of, as like the elected rep body that is responsible for educating these kids and making sure they are safe, just taking that authority, because I think he tries to thrive on I'm responsible for safety. But if we just, you know, like we were elected to do this in this community, we'll let you know when we need you. That might, I don't know. I think it just positions the argument differently.
I think in light of nothing happening, I don't think anything's.
He got his headline. He's probably.
Well, he's probably forgotten about it now, but who knows? But I don't think this is really as important right now. If we feel like there is concern amongst the parents, then maybe something going directly addressed to the parents in the bi-weekly newsletters would help. But I would think I would like to have something like on reserve or just ready to go if something were to happen, so we're not just kind of taken by surprise and you know, do nothing. That's all.
I think if we put more of the information that we learned in the last meeting about how we do keep our kids safe and we keep the staff and teachers trained, that was really enlightening for me. I mean, I didn't know what some of those procedures were because they've changed since I was in school. So I know it helped me, and then like you said, it helped a lot of the parents that you had talked to feel better about what was happening. That might be helpful to put in there instead, to put more of a positive focus on how we're being proactive. If you wanted to keep something like this on here.
So do we want to proceed with action tonight in trying to draft a statement? Do we want to have something on reserve? Do we want to go back and maybe have some board members email information to Hilda on what we want to see in it, so that maybe it has some input, and have her kind of compile it? What is...
So just having been on the board trying to write these letters,
Yeah.
I think I understand like the desire to have something sooner than later. I think that if we started with what Annette has provided us, and that we individually give our responses to or feedback to Hilda or Dr. Boyle, then we're at a better starting point. Because I'm not gonna like sit here and like make comments on where the commas go or what language we use. More just like this is the goal, this is how we're going to do it, and because I don't really care about the rest of it as much. So I think it's better to work on this through that method, and then we can revisit it in 2 weeks when we have something closer to a final that we can talk about on that.
Okay, so perhaps this is something that we would, I know Mr. Zaragoza, it sounds like, is of the opinion that we do kind of the latter of the two that I mentioned. Other thoughts? Maybe have everyone express their comments and then bring it back.
I really like Tiffany's idea of the gentleman who gave us the presentation last meeting about maybe he has a little synopsis of all that, you know, because he covered a lot of points. Maybe he's got a little one-paragraph synopsis that we can maybe ask him to also send to Hilda. We can put it all together and look at it in 2 weeks. maybe, I don't know what you guys think.
So
That's a good idea.
perhaps a synopsis on what, or some
All
bullet
the
points
safe-
on
all
what
the-
we've done.
All the safety in the schools and all the different things he presented to us that were impressive. Yeah. Just,
That's a good idea.
not using acronyms.
Okay, so is that sufficient direction, Dr. Boyle?
Yes.
Okay. So then, I don't know that we necessarily, if there's agreement to put this on the next agenda, which we have a motion to
You should
table it.
motion to table it.
Okay,
And you could say to a future agenda in case.
in case it's not
it's not-
ready.
You guys aren't ready for the next board meeting.
Okay. Would
I
you-
move
sorry.
the governing board table action regarding the sheriff's efforts in the Creighton School District governing board's boundaries regarding sheriff posses.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded. All in favor of the motion to table, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion has been tabled to a future agenda item, agenda meeting, future meeting. Future board agenda. Until some other time in the future. And the next item is the legislative/political report, and I think we had previously elected designated, was it Ms. Sexton Ruiz as our ASBA person, but I'm not trying to put you on the spot. It's certainly open to anyone, but if there's anything you want to bring up.
Well, I have just some information from federal and state, just what's been happening in the last week, and I could just go over it. If you ask me any specifics about it, we'll have to look into that. State. Oops. Okay. On January 18th, which was Friday, Governor Brewer announced her budget, and it included $110 million in new K-12 spending. $61.5 million is meant to help implement Common Core and PARCC. There is a one-time expenditure of $41.5 million to help implement Common Core standards. This includes $40 million to be spent on teacher stipends for professional development, curriculum, and instructional materials aligned to the new standards and technology and equipment that support Common Core implementation. There is also $20 million in funds proposed to School Facilities Board for Common Core technology upgrades and $1.5 million to fund 3 master teachers at 5 regional centers for professional development. That led to a lot of questions in my mind. Also proposed was a new system of performance funding. $36.2 million from general fund dollars is proposed, with another $18.1 million in reallotted existing formula dollars, according to the governor's office. It will become a permanent part of the funding formula and will be implemented over 5 years, up to 5% of funding. The governor's budget included funds for school safety, directing general fund monies to cover all districts that were eligible for grants under Proposition 301. There was also a recommendation to change funding formula as well, eliminating separate funding for CORL and soft capital and replacing it with allocation of, quote, additional assistance, unquote. They suggest the elimination of the new school projection window. Accommodation districts will be funded on charter school formulas under this proposal, and the building renewal formula will be repealed and replaced with a $25 million in additional grant funding. That's it for the state.
Can I just make a comment on that?
Yes.
I think I was pleasantly surprised to see that there was any, like, the state leadership proposing more money for K-12, but then I woke up and then I read that the legislature is very far from agreeing on any of that. And so I just want to make sure the board's aware that they're under different leadership with different goals, and it's going to be ugly.
So Governor Brewer's budget that she announced is not.
It's her proposal, and then it has to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also, there are a few other things in that air right now. For example, there has to be an agreement. Usually there needs to be an agreement between the Office of Strategic Planning and Budgeting, or OSPB, which is the governor's budgeting office, and JLBC, the Joint Legislative Budget Committee, which is the legislative budget office, on what we predict the revenue is going to be in the next year, actually now the next 3 years they look at. And there are apparently some clear revenue differences that JLBC does not agree with the governor's numbers and does not think that we will have as much revenue coming in the next 3 years as she thinks. So that may or may not lead legislators to be a little more conservative or less willing to give out, restore funding. And then the other issue that came up that wasn't really addressed in the budget proposal because it had just come out was an appellate court ruling on inflation. So we have to be funded under Prop 301 that the voters approved in 2000. We are to get a 2% inflation increase every year. It's 2% or inflation, whichever is less, I believe. But that was always given to us until a few years ago. It was determined that that was something that the voters required, and then the legislature reinterpreted it and took it to a superior court who agreed that the way it was worded, it really sounded kind of like it only applied to transportation. So they've only been giving us an increase in transportation instead of our complete base level. And so the appellate court ruling basically overturned that, and although we do expect that the legislature will be appealing that to the Supreme Court, currently the most recent decision would require the state to fund an additional $80 million a year, basically, in inflation growth for our funding formula.
That's not retroactive, correct?
My understanding was that it isn't, but I don't know. I have not heard that in the discussion, but that it would be $80 million extra every year. And then the other thing, just to point out, was that in the, and we saw this on the legislative day that ASBA had, the legislative conference at the Biltmore in December, that the governor's office talked about this proposal on performance pay, and they actually were saying at the time, this isn't going to be all new dollars. So basically, their plan is to cut us some, and then cut us by, I guess it's 18 million, and then allow us to earn up to 36 million back collectively as school districts through performance pay.
Oh, the federal.
It was federal stuff. You can go ahead.
Well, so let me just take a note on that then. So if that's the case, and we'll see how the bills come out, that means that there will be other implications for our teacher and principal evaluation reform that we are piloting right now, other than the professional development that we talked about. So just it's important to keep in mind the money that's at play as we move forward with that.
And the 2% may sound small, but it's, you know, had we been getting the 2% all along here, I think at least this year we might not have had going into this year, we might not have had to make some cuts. So some of our cuts would have been avoidable, basically. Sure.
Okay. I'm sure most everybody knows about the president's plans when it goes that he came up with last week about gun violence. I'll just go ahead and read. President Obama announces comprehensive plan for school safety. President Obama and Vice President Biden announced a range of proposals and actions to address school safety, which include an executive order and recommendations for a new comprehensive school safety program. National School Board Association Executive Director Thomas J. Gensel attended the White House announcement on January 16th. And I'll just skip down. The executive order seeks to address both school safety and gun violence reduction. Regarding schools, the executive order includes directives to provide school officials with proper training for active shooter situations, provide incentives for schools to hire school resource officers, develop model emergency response plans for schools, and launch a national dialogue on mental health led by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Secretary Kathleen Sebelius and U.S. Department of Education Secretary Arne Duncan. So it goes into more detail if any board members would like to get into them. But basically, there's numbers. Tiffany has more.
And then just to remind you that I'm going to the Federal Relations Network Conference through the NSBA this weekend. And there I'll be lobbying our congressional delegation on reauthorizing the ESRA and on sequestration and then federal funds, including Title I and IDEA. I have an appointment with Congresswoman Sinema's chief of staff. Another school board member and I from the Valley will be going there since she represents most of our district. So I'm excited to let you know what happens and what I find out, and we're going to be bringing data about how the decisions that they make in Congress affect our district, so they'll have hard numbers and see exactly, have a good story, have a good example of how the decisions they make affect kids and teachers. And I can also provide that data to you once I get it.
Tiffany, who else is going to represent CD9? Which other board member?
I do not recall.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Anything else on the legislative or political report?
Can I just ask Tiffany a quick question?
Sure.
Do you want to report out on your conference at the next board meeting, February 5th, or on the 19th?
The 5th is fine.
Okay.
Well, it's fresh.
Of course. Okay, so moving on then to future agenda items. Unless, Dr. Boyle, was there anything you wanted to add from ASA or any of the other organizations legislatively? If not, that's okay.
I don't think.
Okay. It's probably, usually it's the same information. So future agenda items, anyone have, I think, are we going to, there was something mentioned earlier.
Recognition
That was it, recognition of students.
and staff and teachers.
Do you want it like a clerk's fund type of discussion or?
Broader.
Okay. And it has to do with the clerk's fund?
We could.
It could be, but I guess I'm just wanting to know all the ways we recognize students, staff, and teachers throughout the district throughout the year. I think we had a presentation like that recently, but I don't believe the 2 new board members were here for that. So maybe, I don't know if it would be worth repeating the actual presentation. Sure. Okay.
And then I have a few things. Should I just list where it says item for consideration?
Sure, just let us know what it is that you want and fill out the yellow card, which looks like you already have.
Okay. So I have a few. I don't want to overwhelm anybody, but I would like to talk sometime in the future about possibly establishing an educator database for file sharing. I came from Teach for America, and now I'm at Phoenix Union, and both places have really comprehensive data file sharing for teachers to be able to share, and they even have rating systems. So it could be a lesson plan, a unit plan, resources, links to websites, you name it, and it's very comprehensive, and it helps really, especially for first and second year teachers who might be feeling overwhelmed, you know. So that was one. I'd like to talk about Thinking Maps training, and mostly I guess just have a better understanding of exactly which schools use Thinking Maps. And that's mostly because the Phoenix Union has recently decided to implement Thinking Maps in all of their schools, and so I know that there are some school sites that do it here, but it would be nice to have kids who are transitioning, if that's what Phoenix Union is doing, to have them literate in Thinking Maps, or fluent, I guess is a better word, in Thinking Maps. And then to completely change, because that's not at all open source software. But I was just thinking, you can tell that I'm engaged to a software engineer, but there's so many open source software solutions out there, and there are a lot of educational groups who are looking into open source solutions, and so perhaps we could, I don't know, set up a committee or something to address that, because when I went to community council a few months ago and I saw the numbers and how much our software costs, I don't know if maybe with some of those there might be some open source solutions that would help cut costs. And then finally, I know that Meet and Confer is coming up, and I think that since it's classified as an open meeting or a public meeting, just having a better understanding and a more specific, because I looked at Meet and Confer for different schools, or school districts, I should say, and I think that ours has 2 sentences in it when it talks about Meet and Confer. It's very vague, and so I don't know if we could possibly revisit looking at what our Meet and Confer is truly supposed to do, because I don't know if I'm really sure exactly what Meet and Confer, you know, it's not clear enough to the public, and if it's a public meeting, I think it should be more specific, that's all. So that was it, that's what I've got.
Okay. So those will be added then as agenda items. Any others, or are there any others that need to be scheduled? If not, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the... You just seconded it. Was there a motion?
Oh,
No,
I'm
I will
sorry.
entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'm a newbie.
It's okay. Everyone who's been here is really perplexed because I always make the motion to adjourn, but since I'm president now, I'm waiting for someone else.
I move that we adjourn.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed nay. We're adjourned.